Hello. I think welcome to the final session of Wednesday on the global stage. We will be discussing the impact of millennials on global tourism. I have with me today, I'm quite pleased to say, Mr. Ali Hashmi, Tourism and Hospitality Manager for MENA for Google. On the end there, we have Damien Bomer, Senior Commercial Director for Middle East and Africa for IHG. And here in the middle, we have Matt Powell, Managing Director for Middle East and South Asia for Travelport. I'm Scott Booth, Senior Director for Data Products for YouGov Middle East. So why are we talking about millennials? I'm sure everyone has heard more than they care to about who millennials are, so we'll make that part very brief. But when we look at the Middle East, and in fact, if we look at the globe as a whole, just population statistics-wise, millennials comprise a little bit over a quarter of the population of the world right now. What that means for the future, of course, the oldest adult millennials are still quite young in terms of earning power and getting to the middle of their careers. But what that means in the future is as that generation ages, right now the oldest millennials are around 18, or the youngest millennials are around 18. As they age up and get into their earning prime, we expect to see a much bigger, more dramatic impact on where the bulk of tourists are going, how they're planning and booking. Are they using new fancy technologies? Actually, are they avoiding them? Are they going sort of more back to the roots of travel? We really don't know what's going to happen, but we know this is a big generation. There's a big amount of money that will come out of this generation into tourism. So what we'll do over the next 45 minutes or so is sort of put our heads together and discuss what we see now and what we think we see coming. So without further ado, I think I'll go to Google first on this one. I want to talk about planning and booking, and I want to talk about technology. Mm-hmm. So we know that millennials, because of the generation they've grown up in, the time they've grown up in, are using technology differently than previous generations. How is this impacting their planning and booking process?
So can everyone hear me around the back, or is it the guy in the blue shirt? Raise your hand. Can you hear me? Good. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being such a wonderful crowd coming in right at the end of a pretty long day and a pretty long week. So I think, so as Google, it's always good to start. We always like to start with some statistics about how we think about these people. In some senses, how millennials think about travel in their reliance on the internet, 85% of them consider their reliance on the internet as the first stop of whenever they travel, right? So whenever they're thinking about the planning process, information gathering, etc., that is still very much done online for millennials, irrespective of where you are, at a much higher percentage than people who are above 35. So if we're defining millennials roughly as an 18 to 34 bracket, when you compare it, it's 85% of millennials actually start their search on the internet to gather information about the various choices. That's compared to about 60% for the categories that are above them, right? So internet is very much relied on. I think a second statistic that's really interesting is how many of these people actually believe that they can get all of the information that they want and need on mobile and on desktop being the same level of information, right? And that statistic is about 65% versus 44% for their peers. So if anything, they are similar to other folks, but just much more extreme, because these are the guys that have been exposed in some senses to the internet in their prime. Now what's interesting is that when you go from the looking for options to actually thinking about and deep diving into destinations, social starts becoming very important. So for millennials, 44% of them, and this was a study that was done specific to the US, but I think that, and I can talk about others as well, but I'll talk about the US for a moment. 44% of these folks actually reach out to someone on social media or read a review on social to help determine which destination to actually go in. So in some senses, again, 44% versus 25%. So they are a more extreme version of what they do. And I'm going to try to keep it light on the statistics right now because we'll have a lot of time to get into that. But technology is something that these people are familiar with. It's something that they employ, but they also don't just use technology and believe that, well, you know what, I can get all of the information. One interesting statistic from a study done again in the US was millennials are more likely to use travel agents than their non-millennial counterparts. And we'll get into this. We'll start unpacking some of this as we get through the session. Now, if you think about everything that you know that I've just told you in those first two sets of statistics, that's an odd way to think about it. But I think once we psychograph them, once we start thinking about what millennials are and how they're searching for unique experiences, the expertise that a lot of these travel agents bring to them to help them pick that destination or that hotel that is an experience is something that they value quite a bit. So that's just to start us off. Going first is always a bit awkward because you get to test the mood, but I'll let you continue the discussion.
Matt, we talked yesterday a little bit about how this region, and in fact some other regions, have sort of skipped a step. So when we look at the West and we look at millennials, they've gone through a natural progression from no computers at all, desktops, laptops, now tablets and mobile phones. When we look at the region, we almost see a step completely skipped in there, especially when we look at things like booking, commerce. We see a jump to m-commerce. How is that impacting your business when it comes to the planning and booking process when we look at the younger sort of adult group?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that. You know, we said yesterday in our session how, you know, in this part of the world it definitely jumped, it leapfrogged. You know, and we saw it in Africa, and we've seen it definitely in the Middle East, where, you know, the PCs haven't necessarily even been there. And I think what you also see is that from the parents' generation, that you're right. You know, the millennials that we're seeing today, they've grown up with their parents having access to PCs, and that technology's been there. In this part of the world, they didn't. You know, quite often they are the first users within the family to have that technology, so they're kind of leading that way. So what we've seen is a real push towards that mobile space, you know, which I think is obvious. You know, when you look around the room here, everyone's, you know, got a device, multiple devices, and that's really where we're driving. So from a travel pool perspective, and you know, you said it, the experience, you know, that's what the millennials are looking for. So from the booking process standpoint, it was easy. You know, in the past, you offered a flight, a hotel, a car hire, you were done. And more what we're being asked for is, you know, to kind of unpackage that offering. You know, do you want to pay for the extra leg room? Do you want the meal? You know, you want to make that experience completely different. You know, same way that your phone is completely different to the person next to you. So we've spent a lot of time looking at how you unpackage the entire offering. You know, from the flight into the hotels. You know, people want to choose what they have, but then also how we bring in more experiences into that booking process. So for the travel agents and the online travel agents, being able to offer everything that person wants in one screen, in one booking process, but making it as simple as possible. And that's the real challenge, because you unpackage, you make it very, you know, complex, if you like, but you need to make it as easy as possible, because, you know, people don't have the patience to spend too long using the technology. And that's the real challenge. And that's something we're kind of facing head on and working with our partners to do that.
Damien, when we consider the impact of this transition to mobile and the transition of a limited sort of differentiation in inventory to ultimate personalization of a hotel experience, what has the impact been in terms of the planning and booking process for hotels?
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining this afternoon. It's been a market impact, and I guess looking at the booking behaviours, mobile is certainly leading what we're seeing. Roughly a 49-50% growth year over year in our mobile delivery, which is fantastic. But you're dealing with a product that is emotional in many ways. It's a service base. It's a a hotel stay for you, for a hotel stay for me can be very different to what we're looking for in the same product. So the challenge we have is to make sure our content is rich and going to grab people, because you have that element of attention span is so short given the noise out there. So we're very much focusing, excuse me, on developing the rich content, but then take it that next level and really personalising and take it to what's right for you in your stay. That's the part we're working through. Technology plays a huge part in that because you're dealing with massive amounts of data and guest preferences there. But yeah, from my perspective and our perspective, it's growing the digital footprint, serving up relevant content at the right time to the guest, and making the transaction easy as well. From a member, it's 3 clicks and you've made a booking. That's it. So the attention span is short. So yeah, but where it's going to lead to is something we're working on right now.
Okay. How does the, I'm curious now because of what Ali mentioned. Are you seeing a manifestation of, despite the planning going through a technology channel, are you actually seeing equivalent or even increasing usage of travel agents with millennials?
From the hotel perspective, there's always a valid reason for a travel agent. I think a mobile app, a website, a tablet device can only replace some of the information gathering, and you want that personal attraction. And ultimately, you travel to discover, you travel to learn, and the best way to learn about where you want to go to is through somebody else's experience, first-hand experience. Travel agents have morphed into more specialty as opposed to one stop for everything. You're having your travel agents that specialise in certain destination. They might specialise in Uber luxury, that we're seeing a lot of that at ATM this year. And ones that delve in areas of totally off the beaten track, sort of the digital detox as it would be. I can get you there. So no, we're still seeing a very active role in travel agents, but their mandate is changing, and the successful ones are changing their model to suit the customer's requirements, absolutely.
Good. One thing that occurs to me, although it seems Damien, you're talking about a 3-click booking process. Matt, I think you've talked about efficiency in the digital booking process as well. Speaking from a traveler's perspective, there's a lot of choice. There's a vast profusion of information, if you will, and no easy way to sift through it right now. So when we rely on digital channels, unless we have a favorite, and in fact, if we look at millennial preferences, they do have a favorite, but they use multiple. So as you were saying, maybe we start with online, then we shift to social, maybe then we even shift to face-to-face personal interaction, saying, let's filter down experiences, airlines, hotels, destinations. Are we facing a dramatically inefficient process right now because of technology?
Look, let me get this one started because this is something that we're very passionate about at Google, right? User first, thinking about how users have a number of what we call digital moments before they make a decision to buy. So, we've done a number of studies, and if you look at your last purchase experience, you yourselves will recognize that you are going to multiple websites, right? You're going to multiple sources of information to try to gather it all together. And one of the things that Google has at least come up with in terms of an answer is how to take all of this information from these various channels and put them right at the beginning with what we call Google destinations, right? So if you say vacations, and this is not a plug, and to be very clear, this is not a plug, and I'll tell you why we think that this is solving a problem and what it's telling us, what user behavior is telling us. So there are about 140 average digital moments from the time that you actually decide to look for a destination to the time that you actually book. And these digital moments can be reading an article, it can be going to a social blog, it can be going to search for something, it can be seeing an ad on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever it is, right? Each one of these are digital moments, and they take months. So in this particular study, they were looking at a booking for Disney, right? And it's a process that took about 2 to 3 months with a pretty large panel of people to come to that conclusion. Now, what we're trying to do is essentially take this wealth of information and the machine learning to apply to it to be able to start making it easier for you as the user to bring all of that information into one place. So when you say vacations in Europe, there's literally like a pop-up that shows, well, where in Europe are we talking about? How many days do you want to go? How much do you want to spend? What is the event that you are going for, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, literally, this is like a millennial's, I can't use the term wet dream, so a millennial's dream to be able to essentially go and literally toggle their way to craft and curate the perfect vacation that is just for them. At the end of the day, we're not looking to convert those users because we're not in the business of selling, but then we pass that qualified lead on to people that are actually going to be serving that particular customer. So when we look at our data, in summary, there is a massive problem, and the process from discovery to booking is broken. It's a broken process because it takes too long for people with too many sources of information, and people just get more confused. And so from a user perspective, one of the answers that's been presented, at least from a Google perspective, and it's just one answer because the industry is tackling this in various different ways, is to how to bring these sources of information into one place and make it very, very easy for someone to be able to toggle back and forth on a screen that is pretty small. Right, so imagine that wealth of information being done on a screen on a desktop. All right, fine, I have a lot more space, but on mobile, I don't have the patience as a millennial, and I want choice. So how do we go about doing that is still something that we're finding. And if destinations is anything to go by in terms of user uptick, it's growing faster than 150% month on month in terms of usage, because people are coming to it for the simple process of completing something that's a very painful exercise for them. But that's only one answer, just to be very clear.
Yeah, I'd say that 100%, right? There's too much information out there, and that's a challenge, and it's very contradictory as well. Now, and what we're looking at is, similar to what Google is doing, is really looking at helping our customers when they have that customer come onto their website or sit in front of them in the travel agency, to kind of almost know what that customer wants. And taking some of that machine-based learning, looking at what devices are being used when they come on in, just that demographic, to kind of really understand who's there. And I think that's where there is a demand, and it's interesting. We've done a lot of interviews and conversations over the last couple of days, and for the first time in a long time in this part of the world, people are saying, is there a place for the traditional travel agent, the offline travel agent? And you have to look at places like the US, where there was a big booming online. Everyone predicted the travel agent was a thing of the past, and they're not. It is a place for everything. And if it's a simple route, 100%, it's easy to book it online. Go to the website to do it. But more and more with the complex offering, and I think this is where the millennials are driving. It is complex. They do want that experience. They do want to be able to customize and validate what they're going to do. And that's where it becomes important that we try and predict what that's going to be and give them that information. So similar to the work Google is doing, Travelport's doing something similar, which is more at desktop level and at the user level, but really kind of understand what that traveler wants before they come on to kind of filter out the information. So I think the travel agent is going to be there. And we put people in these boxes, the millennial box and baby boomers and everyone else. At the end of the day, those demands are still very similar. If you're booking a complex trip, it's going to cost you several $1,000s to do that. You want to validate. Then you go to your professional, or you make the phone call to say, I've read TripAdvisor reviews. Some say you're good, some say you're bad. Mr. Travel Agent, what do you think? And I think that's where you get that combination of that requirement.
Is there room for, and Ali, I know we talked about this last year, when we look at machine learning, we can get quite advanced. Whether you're a brand like Intercontinental Hotels, or you're a brand like Google or Travelport, even down to smaller, much more sort of boutique mom and pop brands that have technology available to them, is there room for a predictive approach to assembling packages? I'll call them packages for simplicity, but taking destinations even a step further and saying, okay, we understand what people like you in a much more granular way than we have in the past, but we understand what people like you look for. Is there room for that? Would that help? Do we feel like destinations is there or just getting there?
I mean, look, we've just announced actually 2 weeks ago that packages is one of the things that we're running experiments on to take it one step further from the flights separately, and which you can do currently from destinations. You can do flights and hotels, but at the same time, what about packages? So that's something that we're trialing and testing right now. But to your fundamental question, is there a need? If I can reframe your question, right? Is there a need for people to find for us? So remember, we are not selling inventory, right, as Google, but is there a need for all of the people who are dealing with the industry to find easier ways for our customers to ultimately make a decision and then to convert online using information that they are volunteering? Probably, right? And I think that, there's always, and we talked about this last year, there's always that balance between, privacy versus ultimate personalization, and we've all heard sort of the Target horror stories of Target finding out that someone was pregnant and then selling them offers for something before the person even knew that they missed their cycle. That's, if you think about that for a moment, it's incredibly powerful. But at the same time, it needs to be controlled. And I don't think we're in a business right now of that kind of sensitive information, but people are leaving digital crumbs around. And they're sharing information, and a lot of what we hear as a opt-in model, in a sense, from a Google perspective of our users, is people are willing to share information as long as they're confident that that information is going to be properly and sensitively dealt with, and as long as it's going to deliver value. And I think the pain point is there. I mean, by show of hands, just to understand, someone who booked a travel booking in the last, think about it, the last trip that you did, can any one of you raise your hand and say, I'm just curious, because I like polls, user first, right? How many of you would describe it to be easy for you to do, for you to find the information, just easy by your standards? I'm not going to impose a thing. Easy? Can someone raise their hand? Okay, easy, cool. How many of you were frustrated with the experience that you had to spend a lot of time? Yeah, I mean, I saw 3 or 4 people who said easy, and then I've seen probably triple that amount that have said frustrating. So clearly this room represents partly what we already hear from on a much larger scale. There is a pain point, and there is a role for predictive technologies to play to facilitate that.
You're exactly right, and I think technology plays a key role in it, but dealing with a hotel experience that is so personal, it's how much information you want to aggregate to give a preference to somebody to purchase online. That's why we err very much towards our member base. We have just over 100 million members globally. And it's not about earning points, but it's more about understanding more of what these guests want, especially the millennials, because they are a guest, but they have guest needs for themselves. And it's sculpting that specifically there. And a hotel can offer very many choices on property, pre-booking, post-booking, everything else, but you can't solve for anything else. So I think from a property perspective, it's being true to the brand, being true to what we can offer, and actually what we can't offer, because we can't be something for everybody. And what we're finding with the member base is that they're comfortable with the brand, and there's a life cycle. So the millennials will work through Holiday Inn Express, easy brand, easy in, easy out, functional. As they go through to the higher earning potential, as you're saying, they explore something a bit more complex like a Kimpton or an Indigo, and ultimately an Intercontinental. And then once we understand their life cycle, we can serve up content, but you're keeping them in a very tight ecosystem. It's a complex solution to solve for.
It's difficult, isn't it? You can't package everything up. Whether you want extra leg room, whether you want the softer pillow, is a real personal item. And we can capture that along the process and over time, and then preferences and crumbs. So where I've seen within the online travel agent view, especially in India, I think in this part of the world, that's probably the most advanced online travel environment that we have today. They're starting to do it. They're starting to get to a point of understanding the customer. So they're starting to kind of capture who that person is, and what do they really want. So when it comes to an airfare, for example, if they know that you're an 18-year-old backpacker, right? You don't care. You don't care if you've got to spend 12 hours in the departure lounge waiting for a flight, as long as you're saving $50. but then they also starting to understand, maybe you're a 20-year-old, but you're on a business trip, right? In that case, you need to get there as fast as you can. Price isn't necessarily an issue. And that's where I think it's starting. We're starting to see that personalization from a travel site standpoint, where just understanding the customer, they understand there's no point offering that guy the 12-hour connection. And if it's a family, you need to get there as easy as possible, as cheap as possible. So I guess it's kind of crude at the moment. But then where we're seeing that adding on is you then add on the extra pieces around that. And that's where it becomes very difficult to kind of package up for that traveler. Do you want the softer pillow? Do you want the extra leg room? That sort of stuff. That's where it becomes really tough at the moment. But we're going to get there.
So we've focused a lot on technology, which seems quite appropriate. This is the first generation really to reach adulthood and have accessible internet. I remember when I first got internet. And it's the first generation to really grow up alongside technology. We didn't have tablets when we were 4 or 5. We didn't get them until we were adults. So it's an appropriate way to look at it. What I want to get into now is destination and customer interfacing, because growing up around technology, and not just technology, but some global trends, global disruptions, some major global events in the late 90s and in the 2000s, and still some ongoing today, has changed the way that this generation feels about the world, the topics that are of concern. Have we seen a dramatic shift in destination selection, in destination mix? I think first I'll throw that out to you, Damien. Are you seeing a change in destination mix?
Absolutely. I think, excuse me, from a regular traveler's perspective, they're becoming a lot more interested in off the beaten track. We have a property opening up in Vientiane in Laos very, very soon. One of the first untouched parts of the world opening up to a global brand. We're seeing people really want to stretch their knowledge once they travel into a new destination. They want to come away with something, and they want to leave a very small footprint. You've got that element of environmental awareness, and they want to travel's become a social currency, and you can't get that. You can't fill your bank account with your typical, Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne type of transfer. You want to go a little bit off the beaten track. So the great thing with IHG is that we have the brands to suit most of those areas there, and the guests, and also be respectful of the local community once we go into there. It can be very rewarding from a global company to work with a developing nation like that, to skill the national workforce as it would be, because then you can give back an experience to the guest. Like Intercontinental, we have a fantastic program for curated guest experiences, so you can go and have your beautiful 5-star meal overlooking the Da Nang Peninsula as it would be, but then the next morning you can have breakfast local style, and that's not something that anybody can really get, and you don't automatically attach it to a 5-star brand, but it's an experience that's limited, but of great value as well. So yeah, we're certainly seeing a spread across the world of destinations, and obviously the brands to fill them as well.
Ali, I'm interested from the big data Google search perspective. Are you seeing, particularly actually destinations is a good platform to measure this on, are you seeing a shift? Do you see an age difference in the destination selection?
Look, I think one of the big things before even talking about the Google angle is that, we've talked about experiences as being important. And one of the stats that shocked me when I've looked at this consistently is that, 78% of millennial travelers would rather spend their money on what they consider a meaningful travel experience than as a down payment on a house. Right? The idea that, meaning at some level and experience, a meaningful experience can be more important, and this is in many of the parts of the world, at least in the US, millennials are staying longer and longer with their parents. So which in a sense what that does is that frees up a lot of income, so obviously then you don't need to put a down payment on a house because your parents are not going to kick you out, or at least so they think. But I think there is something to be said about the way that people are actually approaching, millennials are approaching destinations and experiences, which ties in very closely with what you were talking about. You know, on destinations, I don't have any stats to share right now, but there is definitely a bifurcation in terms of more of the off the beaten path. So when you look at correlated terms of millennials and how they search online for hotel experiences, it is very different than older. So when you talk about when you talk about older generations, there's often a brand association once they've picked a city. But when the types of questions that they ask millennials about cities is, you know, things to do, experiences in Lagos, right? Jazz in Lagos. These types of queries, which go to a second or third layer about that particular destination, are much more strongly correlated with millennials than they are with non-millennial travelers. So that's an interesting way to think about how people are searching for that second layer of experience. It's causal. This is not exactly, you know, you can't correlate and build a model out of it just yet, but at least we're beginning to see correlated search terms, which is one of the ways that we look at how people are searching and how they differ in their search behaviors. You can clearly see differences emerging from that perspective.
I think, I mean, from what we see, we've seen a couple of things. We've seen, well, so if you think about our parents, you know, a typical vacation was once a year, 2 weeks, going by a pool, laying on the beach. Quite simple, you know, and that was it. So what we've seen is more of a move to last minute booking. We used to predict booking patterns quite simply. January was always our busiest month. That's no longer the case. And what's interesting is it's been driven by the millennial segment, but it's starting to go outside the millennial segment, which I think is the same for a lot of what we see across technology, etc. So booking times have sped up or changed to more last minute, and people don't want 2 weeks vacations anymore. It's more, we want to have more experiences, and that's the key word that we all keep saying is experiences. That's the difference. They want experiences. They want multiple experiences. So it's more a case of let's do it for a weekend. Let's go away for one night, and it's not necessarily that go sit by a pool or sit on the beach for 2 weeks or a couple of days. It's when they're there, they want to see as much as they possibly can. So we're seeing kind of more diversification into different destinations, and when you're there, kind of doing more stuff. So you're there for two nights. Mm-hmm. You cram in as much as you can in that city or that place and experience so much of the culture that you understand it. And I think for me that's kind of the main difference that we're seeing is booking times and just like a mix, shorter lengths and more destinations. And you see that with kind of low cost carriers into destinations that have never been served by airports before. They kind of they're picking those destinations, and that's the real change that we're seeing.
And on the booking windows, one of the things that we see about MENA millennials, and totally agree, is that MENA millennials, which is a bit of a tongue twister at times if you try to say it too quickly, it's 70% of MENA millennials actually start their research a week before traveling. 70%. I think I'm a millennial still, right? And I don't do that. I don't think I fall in that category of 1 week, but there is definitely something to be said that getting on a plane is not about getting on a plane. My parents' generation would need to arrive 3 hours before a flight took off, right? We now look at it as getting on a bus. It's almost like a plane is a bus. You're just going to get on. It's not a big deal going to the airport. You're going to do it quicker. So on the shorter booking windows, we're definitely seeing that in the data.
Yeah, very much.
Damien, going back to the experiences, I don't think we can avoid the drive for getting deeper into the culture, and I'm interested in how I grew up with IHG as a brand, and what I knew about IHG as a younger man was that they're quite insistent on the quality of the concierge, the ability of that person, that staff, that set of staff members in the hotel to be able to drive the experience that the customer will have. Mm-hmm. Do we still see, with the millennials specifically, do we see a reliance on that function in the hotel, or are we seeing, as with planning and booking, are we seeing more of our millennial guests turn towards a technology-aided?
It's a really good question. Excuse me. The concierge still has a very valid role to play in a hotel. Probably more transparent in the way they earn their commissions nowadays, as it would be, but they're a wealth of knowledge, and we're seeing them as a validation exercise. So we have guests that would do their research on TripAdvisor, on Yelp, on any other sort of peer-to-peer review site and say, look, I've got these 5 restaurants, which one's best? And then again, back to the personalised, well, actually, sir, madam, I've actually eaten at this one last week. This is what I enjoyed about it. But however, you might like this. So still a very valid role they're playing, but it's more a validation role as opposed to, I don't know what to do today. They've got a shopping list and they want to narrow that down on property to make use of, as you said before, that limited time they have in New York City or whatever destination it may be. So still very, very valid.
I think just something to add there, right? Now travelers arrive at the concierge desk to the extent that they go there much more informed, right? They've already done a lot of their research. So we, last year in November, December, we launched a beta of the Google Trip apps, right? And part of what that's designed to do is to say that, look, to the extent that people are going to be traveling to a particular city, there are already pre-curated, pre-populated options that they select. Well, are you there for 3 hours? Are you there for 6 hours? Are you there for 8 hours? Do you like culture? Do you like food? Are you there for art? Are you there? And it's specific to each city. And it actually essentially allows you in offline mode, right? So you don't even need the web when you get there, to pre-download an itinerary and then walk up to the concierge and say, hey, just to vet. Now, often I've found, and I've tested this because I'm a user first and a Googler second, right? I think about these products as, are they useful to me? And what I have found is that I still rely quite heavily on this app, but in city to city, I'm definitely making sure that I'm going to the concierge and just saying, look, let me test them. Yep. So one of the things that I will do is I will actually test the concierge, which probably makes me a nightmare when I walk up to these desks and I'm telling them, well, I can do this in the 2 hours, etc. But what it's saying is that technology is always going to aid, but the wealth of knowledge that exists is something that we need to probably find a way to connect a bit better, right? But for most people, the fact that you're sitting on a plane right before you take off and you're doing nothing, and you can look through itineraries that are curated and then rated by people, and then the time is put in and that's integrated into your maps, that's too good of a value proposition to pass up. But I think hotels need to do quite a bit of work to, go the next step then, because the basics have been done. I'm not going to walk up to a hotel generally and look at those brochures, because that's probably a bit too old for me now. But what I do want is, okay, I get what you want to do. Let me tell you that there's a spot there where I can get you the best seat. There's a spot there, so there's the value add aspect as opposed to the informational layer, which is already being offered by a lot of the technology platforms such as ourselves.
And actually, it's a very valid point. That's the opportunity to surprise and delight a guest, because they've done all this research, they may be a regular guest to us, and to hit that one little sweet spot of that special seafood restaurant that maybe hasn't been curated yet, that can be the first guest there. That adds to that social currency. And yeah, it's a great dynamic to watch evolve, and it hasn't stopped yet. It's still certainly evolving.
And that's what we've seen with the travel agents. They need to be one step ahead. That's something we focus on for the travel agents, because when that person sits in front of the travel agent, going back to where does the travel agent sit, they need to be that one step ahead. So whatever they're recommending, have you been to New York City? What do you recommend? You can guarantee the guys that he's like you. They're testing them. Well, no, actually, this site says it's rubbish. Right?
It's the Carrefour effect, right? I'm asking you for a recommendation on a fridge or a TV because you're the guy selling it.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm pulling it up on my phone on Amazon or Souk.com and saying, well, does it have this spec? And
so what we've tried to do is we've then looked at how you keep the travel agent one step ahead.
Right.
So you search for that hotel in New York, we bring up a map, there's this of attractions around it, they get the TripAdvisor review at the same time. So in their eyesight, it's there. So they don't then say, this is a great hotel, and then TripAdvisor saying it's not. They can see straight away, it's only got 3 stars, and they can tell the guy that. And that just makes them one step ahead. And I think that's the same for the concierge in that example.
So it's a lot about building trust and credibility, which leads us to our next point. Perhaps the most commonly claimed attribute of millennials, loyalty. And we've discussed this at various points in the past from various perspectives, but this is the generation of me. This is the generation that invented the selfie. This is the generation for which hotels and destinations have now invented Insta spots. The perfect place to take your own selfie, right? With such a self-focus, have we completely lost the concept of loyalty with millennials?
Interesting question. With 100 million guests as members to IHG Rewards Club, as would say now, we have a fantastic wealth of knowledge that we can apply to their future stays. I think there's a healthy element of cynicism to loyalty, because to earn points and burn points as in the traditional way is there as the hygiene factor, but it's what's beyond that. So once, from our perspective, is that we have a better opportunity to learn more about the guests whilst they're a member. We can personalise their stay and make it unique to them. We might have 6 selfie spots around the resort in Bali, just we'll know which one that you may like to go to versus the other. But it is a really tricky balance to go with. And it's back to that earlier statement of how much information do you gather and how much do you personalise before it becomes a bit creepy. But with the knowledge of the guests and the frequency of stays, we can deliver on the preferences and surprise and delight. So yeah, I think that loyalty still has a very, very key role to play, but it's finding the right loyalty offerings for the guests. Like I said before, one size doesn't fit all, absolutely. But the one thing that we're finding hasn't changed is that the reason for travel is still there. People want to recharge, they want to relax, they want to switch off, celebrating an arrival or a departure of a friend and family. So the reasons are still there, but to your point as well, they want to cram in so much more, and that so much more is about me and my time. So still a very valid point for loyalty to play.
I think it comes down to that instant reward. We were saying earlier that the idea in this age bracket that you have to commit yourself to one brand for a long time to get the free flight or the free hotel night, it's kind of alien. It needs to be quick. You need that instant reward, that reward that if you stay here, we're going to give you X now. That's where the loyalty starts coming into. I struggle. I think loyalty overall is probably gone, as we know it, as it stands at the moment, because it's very hard to tie people into one brand or one product. I find myself, I'm a business traveller, I'm fairly loyal to one airline, mainly because of where I live. But when it comes to hotel properties, I'm not that loyal. I belong to 6 or 7 programs, and it all comes down to what hotel is in the right place. So
We'll talk.
Okay. And that's where we struggle on it. And I should be more because I can get the benefits out of it, but I'm not, and I think that's something that resonates. So, but if someone says to me, if you stay this weekend, I'll give you a free upgrade. I'll do this. That's what's starting to entice me, and I think that's not just in that millennial segment. I think probably across the board, you're seeing more of that. It's that instant reward. Come to us now and tie. And if you do it right, then you probably tie them in. You get them into that loyalty, and that's the balance.
So is it? And you had a very interesting point, so I don't want to skip it. But we used to talk about loyalty as reward and recognition. Is it more about immediacy and access now than reward? Because reward is very, as you said, usually a long-term thing that a brand gives you in exchange for profitable business that you've given over. Is that going away?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I mean, I bet everyone in this room and at ATM, is loyal to something. You've got cards in your wallet. You do get bombarded. That's where I struggle. You said Carrefour. Every time you walk in Carrefour, they're offering their loyalty program. Every shop you walk into in Dubai Mall is offering their loyalty program. So at some point you kind of make a decision which one's going to be part of and which ones you aren't, because you can't be all of them. So I think there's definitely a place. I don't think it's going away. I think it's basically subsidized and complemented with other programs that kind of attract you. And if you attract and you get you hooked and you do enough attraction, then you probably build loyalty on the back of that, and you hook them into those loyalty programs at that point.
Right. Ali, when we look at millennials and we think about loyalty, so far we've heard about programs, we've heard about cards, we've heard about a variety of sort of incentive structures to get them there. From a Google standpoint, maybe from a personal standpoint, I'll let you speak to that, but I'm curious, as with destinations, do we see loyalty in terms of search, in terms of affinity from millennials?
Yeah. Look, it's interesting because when you look at some of the data, 54% of millennials will actually look at most two brands before they make a decision to purchase. Right? When you look at the UAE perspective specifically, and they just looked at one brand before purchasing, that number is about 43%. That's pretty high, right? If you look at it, and this is one of the things that doesn't jive with the overall psychographic, which is why you need to kind of keep peeling back this onion to understand this a bit better. It's not that everything goes. They do have this sense of loyalty, and part of it, I think, and this is just conjecturing, is a function of how much time people spend in finding that place that is going to give them the experience. And if you can delight them and find a way to surprise them at that moment, then it is the place that just becomes a go-to, because how much time do you have to do this? And millennials do what, about 4.78 trips. Millennial business travelers will do about 4.7 trips a year. If I'm applying that amount of diligence on every trip, at some point I'm only human. I need to kind of stick with what I have come to know as a provider of that experience that I'm looking for. Right? So in my view, I think loyalty is still a thing. But what's also conversely odd, I don't have this number for the UAE or KSA because this study was done in the US. But the number of people, millennials in the US, that are actually part of loyalty cards is significantly smaller than non-millennials, right? So loyal, but then at the same time, not part of a whole lot of loyalty programs, which I'd be interested in hearing perhaps your view as to, as a hotelier, how do you square that, those two stats, assuming that what I'm telling you is right?
It's a very interesting one, because your pure loyalty has become a commodity. Everything from Carrefour through to Intercontinental, there is a loyalty element there. Every credit card you have, every bank you walk into. And it's stripping back that loyalty and looking at what's important to the guest, to the traveller. And if you can surprise and delight at that moment of purchase, that you can get them there. Maybe the loyalty program benefits need to be more broad. We're exploring that through the IHG platform there with different tiers, and not just traditional, gold, platinum as it would be, Aspire Elite. But there is certainly a part for it there. It is a conundrum, and I know our global team are working on that. But I think our focus is to really understand our current membership base, our loyalty base, and see what we can do to drive them to the next. Our acquisition levels are still very high for loyalty, especially in this part of the world. Unfortunately, people do have 6 or 7 cards. That's okay. But it is a conundrum we're dealing with. And I think it's that element of healthy cynicism in the buying practice of a millennial. It's loyalty, that's it. Until they see what's in it for them, that's when they'll commit to it. So yeah, it's a balance.
One final question, and then we'll throw it out to the audience for any final thoughts. We've talked a lot about millennials, technology, how that's changing destination, how it's changing customer interaction, whether loyalty as a concept is still valid. What about the future? I think it's important that we as businesses consider what and whether to change in response to millennials. Is it actually that millennials as a generation are driving this change, or is it technology? Is this a real change? Or as we see millennials age, since we're talking about a generation, as we see them age, when they hit their late 40s and 50s, will they behave the way that their parents did in their late 40s and 50s? I think we'll just...
I think it's... several questions in there. I think the technology's helped. well, the technology's helped to drive the mindset, right? And the early adopters are the millennials. My take is, though, that it's basically the millennial mindset is basically changing how everyone operates, right? You know, whether it's myself, and unfortunately I'm not a millennial. How much I'd like to think I was or want to be. You know, however I work, how my parents work and operate, and that's been driven by the technology. So I think what we're seeing is basically you've got early adopters being in that millennial segment. You know, and they kind of pick up, they drive it, then you know, that kind of spreads. Everyone starts seeing it and goes, well, that's how we should be doing. And then they start sharing their experiences, and then the older age groups are then seeing it. So I guess my take is we're already seeing that millennial mindset with regards to travel kind of go across other segments of the market already. So based on that, I think it's here to stay. I think it's only here to stay as it stands at the moment. I think you're going to see it evolve even further. I've got kids 10 and 13, and they're operating very different to how the millennials work. So, but I do think whether that's using Snapchat and just sending pictures every day to keep your streak up, it's that sort of thing, and you're going to see more. You're seeing more of that mentality kind of exist, right? And that's just going to move across age groups and spread. So I think you're always going to see that kind of segment drive adoption. The millennials are getting older. Millennials, next generation coming, and I think they're just going to keep learning from the early adopters who are probably that youngest age group that we have out there today. So I think that's what you're going to start seeing. So I'd say it's here to stay, but it's not just that millennials. We're already seeing the older age groups and significantly older age groups already kind of adopting that millennial mindset with the devices they've got because they've got access to the same technology.
I guess from my perspective and our perspective is that technology has become so ubiquitous and pervasive in every part of our life, whether it be Snapchat, whether it be just trying to watch a TV program or trying to stream something online. It's there, and it's almost by osmosis that you can't escape it, whether it be just placing your grocery order online or ordering a pair of socks online to spending $10,000 on a trip. It can be done online. So the more people, it's like the windows being open, that the opportunities there are great. But the technology's changed as well. You mentioned before, the 1200 kilobit, first internet connection. If you don't have a 1 gigabyte connection in a hotel now, it's like not having hot water. You need that connectivity, but that's not only from the corporate business traveler, that's from mum and dad who want to share the picture of the beach. Okay, they're going to email you a 16 megabyte file, but at least they're trying to use it. So it's here to stay, absolutely, and I think we haven't seen the end of it yet. Certainly from a travel and tourism and hotel perspective, it's that balance of where people want to sort of, jump onto the technology and actually switch off as well. At the end of the day, technology is there to enable, but you also need technology to sort of not be there to really become yourself and look for that one certain experience. We haven't seen the end of it. I mean, voice activation now is available everywhere. And who would have thought 10 years ago be speaking to computers? Now, our kids, what are they going to have in 10 or 15 years' time? Nobody knows, absolutely. And it's become so pervasive, not only in travel and tourism, but every part of our waking life, absolutely.
Ali?
From our perspective, I think one of the things that's interesting, and I echo some of the thoughts, right, that it's not an age thing anymore, because the reality is that for those of you who have kids that are older than 5 or 6 that can actually articulate their thoughts, or in my case, a very talkative and insistent 3-year-old who kind of decides where we're going to go on holiday, the numbers actually support that 66% of spending on travel is actually influenced by teens, even though what they spend of their money, teens and younger adults, is only like 20%. So there is that influence that is just a sort of a fact of life, and that sort of sets the expectations, wheels in motion. But I think there's also another side where how much technology is too much technology as well, right? And at heart, travel is about experiencing. It's about disconnecting. It's about empathy. It's about things that are bigger than just, some of the things, the selfie that I took and the social cachet that brings alone, right? And so, for me, I think it's an interesting thing, and different brands have done it in different ways, and we certainly work with a lot of partners. But I feel that we've gone too far when we start having robots in certain places where, you know, I'm just okay with having my towels either delivered by like a normal human being that I can say, hey, how's it like living in this city, right? So I'm a bit more talkative, so I like to engage. But again, I'm not projecting forward only. There is a case to be made that technology is going to continue informing what we do. We haven't touched on virtual reality here, right? But the reality is that the top 4 reasons that people want to use VR for 10 to 17-year-olds, it's a study that was just done literally 3 months ago, is about seeing a new country, 67%. Seeing a new experience or being to a place that I've never been to before or could never travel, that's like 60%. So technology is going to continue accelerating this desire for giving us access in places that we normally would never have. But I think as an industry, we need to be mindful that there is a case of too much technology as well, getting in the way, you know, letting people experience that place without necessarily, without necessarily overburdening people with technology. But that's just, I'm not sure that's a full Google view. That might be a partial my view, but you're going to get both. So
just to close up before we throw it out to the audience, I think what we've seen, hence the title of the session, is really, although millennials may be first adopters, they may be driving some of this change, I think what we're seeing is it is actually, in fact, rippling out. I know my parents are now, bless their hearts, trying to book online. I know I have nephews and nieces who are driving the family decision making through technology. I think it's here to stay, and I think some of the sociological reasons behind it, ecological awareness and global awareness, they're not going away. So the change that we've talked about is something that we'll have to confront now, and as we move into the future, if we want to remain successful. Any questions from the audience before we close? Yes.
I'm going to wait for the mic.
When you're speaking about MENA millennials, obviously the age bracket is anybody kind of born from 1980 to 1995, I think. Are there any palpable or like tangible differences in behaviors when it comes to travel from the younger millennials to the older ones that you've noticed?
This is purely consumer opinion data from YouGov. We see differential brand usage. So we see a tremendous difference in the younger millennials who are still in sort of a university, early career backpacker almost kind of stage. Obviously that can be income dependent. We see a huge difference in the brands that they pursue and the destinations that they pursue versus older millennials. Actually, to be honest, the destinations are not dramatically different, but how they perceive them, how they interact with the destination is quite different. And it's a matter of staying in a higher star of hotel or in a hotel as opposed to a hostel. But the patterns are similar, but spend and usage are slightly different.
I think just to add to that very quickly, off the beaten path, I mean, you know, this is an conclusive study, but I've seen several people who've attempted to explain that millennials are less inclined or less deterred by, you know, things like political violence and like stability and safety, which, you know, couple that with a desire for experiences and off the beaten path, that can lead you down, you know, beautiful and remarkable countries in this region that many people would say, I'm not so sure, but, you know, they're happy to go to Yemen, they're happy to go now. So there is that element of a bit more adventurism. Now, do I have a definitive study to prove that? No, but I've seen this in several studies in the literature review where they talk about that as well. You know. Good.
Hi everyone, thank you for this amazing panel and discussion. I'm a Millenial myself and I do have brand loyalty. I was born and brought up here in Dubai. So one of the strongest brands that I am loyal to is Emirates Airlines. You know, consistent quality customer service, always providing that, and they support one of my favorite charities. So if you're talking in terms of brand loyalty, the idea that we're contributing to something better than ourselves, along with buying a product or a service or an experience, always makes that additional point. My question is to all of you, with Mina Millennials, how much is traditional word of mouth still in use today for travel as opposed to digital? How much is it?
From a hospitality perspective, speaking accommodation and dining and food and beverage, it's so important. It really is. You can have so many 5-star reviews on a hotel or a restaurant, but if you hear from your brother or a good friend that, hey, that has the best mansaf, that's where you're going to go. This place has the best uzi, you're going to go. Definitely, it's super, super strong. But again, the element of disappointment can be quite high as well. So if it's been recommended personally, recommended thrown on reviews, but it doesn't live up to that expectation, there can be a greater disappointment level if it's not up to that person's desires. Absolutely.
100%. I mean, I think it comes back to too much information and validation of that information. So you can read as many reviews as you want, but until you actually get to a point where someone just turns around to you, someone you trust, and says, that's an amazing restaurant, or that's an amazing hotel, or destination, that's where you make the decision, right? Then you'll go and research it, right? You'll do your own research on the back of it. But the fact Dubai is a great example, right? How many restaurants have opened up over the last couple of years, and they're busy from day one, and they get that through word of mouth and conversations with people. So I think 100%. You can get rid of it. You can put as much into technology. Comes back to the point, too much technology as well. But someone you trust says that's an amazing place or amazing experience. You must try it. Is the thing that's going to make you probably at least consider it, and then that's the big step forward.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of almost being able to bypass the technology, although we love it as a millennial as well. We love the technology, but the opportunity to bypass the clutter and the inefficiency of that searching for yourself by having a trusted person, could be anyone, honestly.
Yep.
But someone that you trust through any channel, having that recommendation is still sort of number one driver.
100%. I mean, the question was, do we still see the need for specialized travel agents? And yeah, and I mean, that's where I think the travel agents have evolved, or are going to evolve. I think if you look at the US and Europe, and it will come into this region now. With online coming on, there's certain things you can do which are very simple. Booking a flight from Dubai to Qatar, for example, 100%. It's easy. You've got choice of probably 2 airlines really in that mix, and you'll just do that yourself. When it comes down to that experience, you'll get the word of mouth, you get the suggestion, you'll do your research, and then you want to validate. If you're going to spend several $1,000s on this big trip that you want to do, you do want to validate it, and that's where what we're seeing from our travel agent customers is they are becoming more specialized full stop, and they become focused in one area or a destination, and they become the go-to person that you trust, the final check you trust, and you say, yep, that's the trip I'm going to take.
Thank you.
I think if I can just add one thing. So based on data that we've collected for recent events as well as previous versions of Arabian Travel Market, what we see is there absolutely is a need for niche travel agents, but the niche is getting smaller. It's becoming more specific, because when you need validation of a path that you've created through this tremendous amount of information and technology, you're no longer asking for someone to furnish options to you. You're asking for them to validate something that you've already thought about rather thoroughly. So yes, there is still a need for it, but I would say it's getting more difficult to fill that need.
I agree.
I think we had a question here.
Hi, my question is, compared to non-millennials, are millennials spending more in the hotel during their stay?
That's a fantastic question. Spending more than a traditional corporate guest or non-millennial, I'd probably say they're being a lot more selective about what they spend their money on and probably spending a little bit less. And this is where they want to get out and experience the local area. So if you look at a sum total spend in the destination, I think it's increasing, but on property footprint, it would be slightly decreasing, absolutely. Which brings up a really interesting challenge from a hotelier perspective, is that how do we remain current with an asset life cycle of 15 to 25 years? So our restaurant concepts need to keep updating, our service sequence needs to keep updating to fit that requirement and that need and that real demand for that millennial guest. And at the end of the day, we can't keep them all eating every meal in the day under our hotel roof. So to answer your question, hotel footprint declining, but its destination increasing.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Any other questions? I think this will be the last one.
So, hi. So I guess Ali mentioned, and he did a small survey here saying that some people when they book online, they feel some frustration, or I mean, there's really a pain point there in Google search or wherever, but they will definitely, even if they feel that frustration, they will do their experience again. They will, for the next travel, they will look online, and they will go to the several, I don't know how many options is there online to choose from. So my question is, doesn't the saving from searching a lot, doesn't that saving, when you find that real good promotion, last minute booking, etc., compensate all the frustration? And is not at the moment the best way for millennials? I think it is, as a millennial, and a lot of my friends as well, the best way to search for the vacations, even if you spend 4 or 5 hours in the internet looking for all the locations, etc.
So just to clarify one thing, the study isn't about Google search. It's about the time that people spend in general online across all the places. So this is TripAdvisor, this is going to Booking.com, this is going to Google search, this is going into YouTube, whatever, right? So the point is that people are spending a whole lot of time. I don't know how to answer your question satisfactorily in the sense that will people continue to push forth? The reality is that the numbers show that 85% of these people are going to start their search online. This is a fact. This is something that we have to accept. But I think when you talk about the related concept of loyalty, how do you earn that when you're frustrating the hell out of your customers in being found, right? So I think from your perspective as a user, our view is, and this is more of a Google view, is that process and all the technology that exists should be as painless as possible for you to discover and to book all the way through, right? That's how it should be. Now, the fact that are you willing to put up with a bad experience, that's obviously a choice that you will make, but our view is that you shouldn't have to, right? Will you continue to do it? Perhaps you will, but then that also leads to the question of, what does that mean for loyalty? Is that, are we making it easy? I remember one website when 3 years ago, which isn't a whole long way, with a major brand in this region, we did a study of how long it took to book. It was 17 steps on mobile. 17 steps. Now, did that hotel go out of business? No. But if you ask people how satisfied they were with that booking experience, not very. And think about it in a sense that where some of these hotels, unlike an IHG that is a global brand, only exist in a certain place and time, are you ever going to recommend that brand that took you 17 clicks to show up to that particular website? Probably not. So
I agree with you 100%, and that's the role that we're trying to have there, right? You'll put up with that frustration, right, and you'll continue to do it, and sometimes it will work out well. You'll go to a great restaurant or stay in a great hotel, and other times you won't, right? And that's where the frustration comes. And you'll continue to do that, and then behind the scenes, companies like Travelport and Google will continue to kind of refine it to make it easier, and that's our goal. From my standpoint, that's what our company is doing. We're looking at how we can make, when you go onto that online travel agent, We want it to be validated. We want you to be 99%, 100% sure that's the right answer without having to go through the frustration. So I agree 100% with Ali. You shouldn't have to. That's the end goal of what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, all of you. Have a wonderful evening. Have a wonderful last day at ATM.
Thank you.